From religion to wrestling, gumbo to grits, politics to poetry, and all things Southern in between, this is Take on the South. Produced by the Institute for Southern Studies and hosted by the College of Arts and Sciences at the University of South Carolina, Take on the South examines the highs and lows of the American South, examines the truths and fictions of the country's most distinctive region, and picks the brains of some of its most accomplished students. To understand the South, you need to take it on, and that's what we'll be doing. Join us as we take on the South. It's not every day a new scholarly journal hits the bookshelves. In fact, it's quite rare. Competition is very fierce in that marketplace. And so it is with considerable delight today that Take on the South can tell us listeners about one such new arrival. Today we talk about the new journal, Carolina Currents, Studies in South Carolina Culture. Carolina Currents publishes across a variety of disciplines, from history, archaeology, political science, religious studies, and so much more. Consistent with its motto, Understanding for the Common Good, Carolina Currents seeks to connect academic research to the lived experiences and practical concerns of the state's residents. The first volume is hot off the press, and the journal is sponsored by Francis Marion University and published in partnership with the University of South Carolina Press. The editor of this important new journal is Professor Christopher D. Johnson of Francis Marion University, where he is Professor of English and has been the director of the McNair Institute for Research and Service. Professor Johnson is a specialist in 18th century British literature and has dozens of publications to his name. Chris, welcome to the program.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
All right, I've got lots of questions about this journal, but the first thing I want to ask is a question people always ask me. You're a Brit and you're studying Southern history. You're an English specialist, British lit specialist, and you're editor of this fabulous new journal on South Carolina. Just tell me how that happened.
Sure. It's, well, at Francis Marion, for a lot of years, I served as department chair and then served a couple of years, as you mentioned, as the director of the McNair Center. Over the years, our university president, Dr. Carter, and I had talked about starting a journal that would be associated with the university and that would focus on South Carolina. I had gained a little bit of experience with working with journals as a book review editor and, of course, as a contributor and on some editorial boards. So when I left that administrative work, that seemed like a good time to start this up. And I was always interested in doing something that would be interdisciplinary, and that would also be able to reach a broader reading public than some of the specialized research that I would do in literary studies.
Yeah, so I mean, you're just a very interesting, curious person who reflects deeply not just on your scholarship, but the place that you live, which is South Carolina. Right. So, are you from here?
I am not. No, I'm a transplant.
All right.
I was born in New England, grew up in New Jersey.
Yeah.
Went to school in Pennsylvania and Delaware. Yeah. And then my family and I lived for 5 years in Missouri before coming to South Carolina.
So the slow migration south, right?
It is, yes.
And you stayed and you like it, right?
Very much so. Very, very fortunate to be here. And we've been here since '96, so we're established.
You know, it's same year that I came as a faculty member here. Yeah. I mean, there's something about it, isn't there? And those things are reflected in this journal. Can you tell us something about the origins of this journal? I mean, why do we need it, right, first of all?
Well, I think we do need it in part because I'm not aware of any other journals that focus specifically on South Carolina. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a lot that needs to be said. One of the focuses that we want to have early on was to pay particular attention to understudied regions and understudied populations, and that really has been our focus. It seems to me that there is just an awful lot of important work to be recovered that lies outside of Columbia and Greenville and Charleston, and that really needs to be recovered. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking of things like in Volume 1 we have that terrific essay on Green Book businesses in the PD and in Florence County. those are stories that are important.
Yeah.
They have shaped our communities. They continue to shape them, and we really want to create a place where they could be recorded and made accessible to people.
Yeah, it's interesting because I mean, if you survey the kind of journal scene for South Carolina, there's the South Carolina Historical Magazine, probably a few other smaller publications, but nothing like this. There's nothing that's interdisciplinary, nothing that sort of digs into places outside of the major metropolitan areas, right? And so I think that you're really onto something here. And the first volume, just out, is doing quite well, isn't it?
It really is. We were very, very grateful and very fortunate to have this project coming online just at the time that the press was starting the Open Carolina initiative for open access, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
Because of the support of Francis Marion and also the University of South Carolina libraries, we've been able to make this an open access document. And when I checked WorldCat, I saw that the title is already available through 650 libraries. And I heard from the press that we've already had just over 400 downloads. So that, as somebody who usually publishes in the literary field, those are very nice numbers to see.
They sure are. And I mean, our listeners might not know what the conventional numbers are for academic books, but we both know that, you know, if you sell a couple of hundred books, you're doing okay.
Yes.
Right? So you're way ahead of where you should be. And I think it's only going to get stronger and have a footprint and an impact on the study of South Carolina generally, largely because it's without bookends of time, right? I mean, you can do colonial to the modern, right?
Absolutely, yeah, and we see that in the first volume where we have John Tuttle's really interesting essay on a South Carolina playwright from the very early 19th century to issues in the 20th century. The fantastic essay by the folks at Furman on the history of Vaughn Plaza, which celebrates the first African American student at Furman, and then the volume concludes with a very modern focused essay looking at the impact of the war in Ukraine on South Carolina, by Jennifer Tatansky Hooper and Lauren Paris. It really, fantastic essay. So we are without limitation of time, and in large part without limitation of discipline. Yeah,
because I mean you're harvesting from multiple disciplines. I mentioned just a few, but it's pretty much anybody from any discipline who has an interest in South Carolina, right?
It is, and if I may make an appeal to your listeners,
yes, do.
I would absolutely say that if someone has a topic, has a finished essay would be great, or even an idea, I would encourage them to contact me. Because I'd be very interested in having a conversation to see if there'd be a way of developing that into an essay for the journal.
So what we're going to do, we're going to list your email, if that's okay, with the podcast, so people can email you directly to ask you any questions.
Perfect.
Okay.
Perfect.
All right. Let's step back just a bit. I'm curious because I do this myself, but in a different way. Some of the challenges you face as an editor of not just a new journal, but a journal generally. I mean, what are some of the things that you have to deal with that you didn't expect to have to deal with? Where do you begin, right? There's a long list, yeah.
There is a lot to do, and as you well know, these are projects that never really seem to end. No sooner had Volume 1 come out than we were finishing up Volume 2, which is now with the press, and starting Volume 3. So it just continues. For me, and I think this probably says more about my own organizational skills, it can be a challenge just to have so many balls in the air at the same time. Working on a project like this, the editorial board and of course me are always in contact with multiple authors as essays go through different different revisions. So in that way, it can be challenging. We do always want to be as inclusive as we can. We are of course a refereed publication. Everything goes through 2 blind reviews before it's accepted. But we always try to find if there's an essay that's not yet ready for publication, we try to find a path forward. And that takes a great deal of commitment on the reviewers, and I'm very grateful for their generosity in doing that. And it also can be just time consuming as we work through multiple drafts, or sometimes even have to refocus essays to find something that would really fit for us. So it's time consuming, but it's also very, very rewarding.
It's one of those hidden dividends that people don't quite appreciate about journals. So it's not just about appealing to an audience. You're actually helping academics develop as writers and researchers, because this peer-reviewed process can be quite arduous. I mean, it's not easy to get a thing published always, but you're saying, look, even if it's not quite ready, we're going to help you reimagine it, perhaps tweak it, edit it, so we've got something that reflects well on you, reflects well on us, and speaks to the general public who's reading this.
Yes, absolutely. And we also we are very willing to look outside of the academy. Certainly essays that are written by archivists, librarians are absolutely welcome, and there are a couple of terrific ones in Volume 2 that we'll see. There are a lot of amateur scholars, and I use amateur in the traditional sense of one who does something for the love of the task rather than for profit. There are a lot of amateur scholars who have discovered important things and interesting things, who may not be as familiar with preparing a manuscript to meet the expectations of a press, and that's where we can really help. And that's work that I'm always very willing to do. And I've just been so pleased with the reviewers who have often come back and said, well, no, this essay is not ready, but here's what's really important in it. Here's what can be developed. Here are some other sources to look at. And we want to continue doing that.
Yeah, I mean, it's the nice side of the profession of higher education, in which people are generous with knowledge and spirit. It's so easy to say no. It's much more work to say no but, or yes but. And I think you've found reviewers who are just being really attentive and very decent about what they're doing.
They really have, and that is a gift for everyone.
So, can you tell us, well, for people who haven't looked at it, some of the content of the first volume?
The first volume is I'm very pleased with it. It opens with an essay by Thomasina Ewell, who is a retired Navy chaplain. Thomasina grew up hearing a story in her family that a distant relative was the ranking superintendent at the Citadel, who had in fact enslaved her ancestors. When she retired, Thomasina began the process of researching that history, and found that it is in fact true. In fact, I just had an email from her last night saying that she is set to have a meal with one of her ancestors from the Coward side, which is the side of the superintendent. It is an absolutely fascinating essay, and really is as much creative nonfiction as it is scholarship, and it has a wonderful humanity to it. It is it's a story of discovery and reconciliation, and it's marvelous. The first volume also includes a terrific essay that that has appended to it a fine recipe for rice pudding. That was done by Christopher Hendricks, who's been a friend for many years. And it examines a recipe from the early 19th century from a cookbook that was assembled by Mary Randolph. Incidentally, Chris and his mother have published an updated version of that cookbook for the modern kitchen, and I can attest that the recipes are really good and very interesting. Right. Chris looked at the recipe in terms of a cultural artifact, seeing it both as, in some ways, a mark of liberation, a woman entering the public sphere, writing about domestic craft, but still entering the public sphere for profit. But at the same time, and this is almost certainly unintentional on Mary Randolph's part, there's a whole history that's hidden. A rice pie recipe would never be possible without rice, and the rice production in our state would never have been possible without the knowledge and background of the people from West Africa who were enslaved. So he really looks at that piece in terms of both what it reveals and also what's hidden in it. And I think it's a very engaging and very good essay. My recently retired colleague John Tuttle wrote a terrific essay about a stage adaptation of South Carolina dueling culture that I think is very readable and very interesting, and another very good cultural history. There is a very fine essay by Erica Johnson and a student, Carrie Chafington, who's now graduated from Francis Marion, who investigated some of the lunch counter protests that took place in Florence. We don't hear very much about them.
We don't.
But they were they did take place. They were very successful, and that's an essay that I'm really very grateful to have, because I think it can be of great use in schools.
I could.
How fun would it be for students in the PD to read that history? And the buildings are still there. The Crest building it has been renovated. It's the history is all still there. Those students were from Wilson High School, which is a high school that my children all went to. So it's it's very vibrant and very alive. As is the piece by Cherish Thompson and Meredith Love on the Green Book businesses in Florence and in the PD.
And you also have a piece on the history of Germans in Charleston.
We do, yes, by Robert Jones. Robert was one of the first folks to contact me. He had written a book which has since been published on the history of Germans in Charleston, the German community. A really fine book. In fact, it's reviewed in the first volume, and he, from that, told us the story of a German immigrant who became a blockade runner, and himself had a very interesting and in some ways a very quintessentially American story of going from really being a new arrival without many resources to becoming a successful business person and also a person of some standing in the community. There's also the degree to which that story was appropriated by later historians, those who wish to defend the Confederacy, and a young person who was probably doing what he had to do to provide for himself and his family, and who doesn't seem to have had much commitment to the Confederate cause, had his story appropriated where he becomes almost a sort of swashbuckling figure who's fighting for a cause that he almost certainly was not.
Right.
So really a very engaging and very readable essay.
And you also mentioned that you have book reviews, right?
We do.
Yeah, it's very important. Right? Book reviews are really important as a way to not just generate interest in particular books, but as a kind of critical analysis of the field and what is being published on South Carolina. I was very glad to see that you've got a fair number of them too.
We do, and Volume 2, that's actually going to expand a little bit.
Okay, good.
We'll be including reviews of creative works. So there's a review essay that looks at 7 recent publications of poetry by South Carolina poets, written by Joangela Edwins. That's a very fine review, and poets publish their collections, and they're often really accessible and readable, and people don't hear about them. So we're thrilled to have that. We also have a review of a recent novel. And for Volume 3, I think we're going to expand that. There may very well be a review essay of recent South Carolina novels. I'm also anticipating a review of South Carolina on Stage, an anthology of South Carolina plays, edited by John Tuttle, who wrote the piece on the dueling. Yeah.
So, as you said earlier, there's a lot of balls in the air when you're dealing with this. I mean, so when readers get the physical copy or the online copy of Carolina Currents Volume 1, you're already working on 2 and 3 and looking forward to 4, right?
We are, yes.
Yeah. And you've given us a sense of what's in 2, what's in 3. Can you give us an idea of the larger trajectory, where you see Carolina Currents going?
A wonderful question. As we become more established, and as people start hearing more about us, and I think as contributors feel more confident, one of the things I discovered with a publication that's just starting off is that there is a hesitancy, which I understand, and we've probably both had the experience of submitting an essay for a collection that never came about.
Yep.
And there are lots of projects that don't ever really reach fruition. But as I think folks have more confidence in the project, and they have every reason to, it's very definitely moving forward. We're hoping to really emphasize more of a thematic theme.
Yeah.
Volume 3 will have a number of essays that will focus on Green Book businesses in South Carolina. Moving forward, I would like to have a volume that focuses on, and this would really be more contemporary than it would be historical, but some of the issues facing healthcare providers and patients in our state, particularly the disparities with rural healthcare.
Yeah.
Those are important things that need to be studied. It seems that our economy in the state is always in transition, and sometimes going in very exciting ways, as we're seeing in Florence County, where there's a huge battery plant that's being built, not really very far from the university, and right across the street from Wilson High School, where the students started their protests. I would like in future volumes to be able to give readers some insight and guidance from economists and others who would better understand the transitions that the state is undergoing. That would be very exciting for me. So I think we will see probably a greater emphasis on thematic focus in the volumes.
Very healthy indeed.
Yes.
I know this is going to succeed. I can tell already that it is. And with your steady hand guiding Carolina Currents, I'm completely confident that this is going to really be helpful for so many people.
Thank you.
Professor Chris Johnson, editor of Carolina Currents, thanks for being on Take on the South.
Thank you for having me.
That was our Take on the South. Let us know yours. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at U of SC South. Take on the South is produced by Matt Simmons of the Institute for Southern Studies. Special thanks to Professor Dave Garner of the University of South Carolina School of Music for composing our music. Tune in next time for another Take on the South.